Hi everyone, this is Sharon. For this month's Raindrop Lila Design Team project, I thought I would do a craft with me and show you how I made this masculine style birthday card and matching envelope. I tied this envelope up with some string and created a little clasp there. And then on the inside, I have this birthday card that I created using Lidia's beautiful digitals. It comes together rather quickly, so I hope you will join me today. I thought I'd start out just kind of sharing some of the papers that I'm using in this project. So for the base of my card, I'm using a piece of this chocolate brown straw paper that I got from Rachel at Roxy Creations. And then I also want to layer in some book page, and I chose this dictionary book page. And for my digital images, I love going to Lidia's kits when I'm making a more masculine birthday card. She's got several photo kits that just really lend themselves nicely to that. So I chose 2 images from her Vintage Love kit, aesthetic photos, and then also 2 photos from a kit called The Little Things. And I like to kind of crop and reformat and resize my images in Word. That seems to work best for me, and I did that here, and then I just print from that program. And then lastly, I picked this image from her Freedom collection. It looks like an old document. Maybe it's from the Declaration of Independence or something. I'm not sure. But I just thought this would make a really nice envelope for my card. So my first step in creating this card is to wax this piece of paper. The waxing gives it a little more weight and texture, and I just love the color that it gets when I put the wax on this brown paper. So I am going to pull in my glass mat. We'll do this on camera. I haven't done waxing for a while on camera. I don't think this plastic mat will take the heat, so let me get my glass mat and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to put down this glass mat and I can really see my ring light. And then on top of that, when I do my waxing, I usually put a layer of this wax paper down, and then I use a silicone mat. So I've got this silicone mat that I have. And then I'm going to put my paper down that I want to wax. And I'm using these yellow beeswax pellets. I've had this bag for several years now. It's lasting me a long time. I'm about halfway through it. And I'm just going to sprinkle some of these onto the paper. Spread those out a little bit. And then I usually use piece of parchment paper to put over the wax and in between that and my iron. So I'm using just a small craft iron. I usually put it not quite too high. It's about 3/4 up on the dial, and I'm just going to press down and melt those wax pellets. You can kind of see that it's melting those. Just crunch them all down. And then after that, after they're melted, I kind of move my iron around to spread out that wax on the paper. And then I'll take a peek. And I've got plenty of wax. You can see the excess on the paper, but I just leave that on there and I can use it again for the next project. I usually kind of flip this over and then give it one more pass. Okay, and then I'll pick this up, and it only takes a few seconds for the wax to dry, but you can see that it gets this beautiful, really dark brown color, which I love. So I'm gonna pull all of my items away, and then we'll start working on the card. Okay, so I have my waxed piece. From the time it took me to pull my mat away, it's been drying, and it's dry to the touch. So I usually like to round the corners on greeting cards that I make. So I'm just going to take my corner punch and maybe do this medium one. Okay, and now I'm just going to fold this in half so I can get an idea for my size. So I made this card, the dimensions of this piece of paper are 7 by 5.5. So my card will end up being 3.5 by 5.5. Okay, so my first step for the outside is to do a little layering or collaging with this dictionary page. I don't want to cover the whole thing in one piece because I just think where the crease is, it gets kind of crinkly and doesn't lay right. So I'm going to create one piece for my back and one piece for the front of my card. So I'm just going to lay this on here. Kind of eye that up and maybe leave it about 1/8 of an inch from each edge. So just lay that down, see where my crease is, and then tear that. And then lay it this way. And then tear it. That'll be my back. And then for my front, I think I'll lay this down this way and maybe just take off this plain part. And then rip this one about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Okay, now I'm going to be doing some stitching all the way around this, but I want to glue it down just to hold these in place before I do my stitching. So I'm just going to use a little bit of art glitter glue for that. And also I'm going to take these outside corners and round them similar to the card. Okay. And anytime I'm using waxed paper, I will use my art glitter glue instead of a glue stick. This doesn't stick very well to things, but art glitter glue is usually pretty reliable. So I'm just going to run a little bit of glue around the outside to hold it in place. And that's another reason if I'm using a waxed piece of paper, a lot of times if I'm able to, I will do some machine stitching and then I know my papers will stay together. Okay. All right, now I am going to stitch around this before I add my pictures to this, but on the inside I am going to add my papers before I stitch. So I've already cut out my 4 images and I'm going to set these aside because they are for the outside of the cover. And these 2 I'm putting on the inside, so I thought I would just situate this one here and then kind of layer in this typewriter image here. I think those will look good. So again, I'm going to be stitching around the outside, but I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to these just to hold them down for a little bit. Okay, I've got these images where I want them, so I'm going to take this to my sewing machine. I'm going to stitch around the outside and then I'll catch these layers on both sides of the card and then I'll be back. Okay, I am back with my stitched piece. And I just love how the stitching kind of gives it a rugged and rustic look. And so now I am going to add my images to the front and back covers. So I'm going to put this one on the front and this one on the back. This is a card for my son, and he loves to go to Chicago, so I really like that image for the front. And then he also likes cars, so I'm putting this one on the back. So on this piece, I'm going to stamp Happy Birthday. I have this set of Happy Birthday stamps, and I've had it forever, but it's really nice. It's got, like, I think there's 10 different fonts in the set, and I thought I would maybe use something like this one. So let's get our black, and I'm going to use this dark blue. It's called Twilight from Versafine. And I'm just going to stamp that across the bottom here. Okay. And then I'm going to glue that on, I think right about there. Okay, and I'm using glue stick for these pieces to glue them on, just so I get a nice coverage all the way around, and that will be plenty strong for doing paper to paper. And then this one I'm just going to place right about there. And then what I like to do on my handmade cards is to put the date on it. And I usually use this vintage stamp that I have. It's just got numbers. It's not really a date stamp, but I put the numbers on there. I'm just going to put that up there. And then because it's just got the straight numbers, I always add a little bit of a kind of a separation in between there so that he can see the date. When I started making cards, I did not have any digital kits, and I always fretted about what to put on the inside and outside of my cards. But now that I have quite a selection of digital images, these really come up pretty quickly and nice and fast, and I think they look really good. So we're just about done. The only thing I have left for my card is to write a little note on the inside, and that's why I picked this typewriter image, because there's enough white space there where we can write a little message in there. So the other thing I like to do when I make my handmade cards is to make a matching envelope. So here's the paper that I showed you that I just decided to use for my envelope. Something fairly simple, but I like the script on there. And so what I usually do is to take my card and just kind of lay it down on the paper, because I'm just going to do a simple envelope where I fold this up. I'm going to stitch down the sides. So I like this coming over a little bit. So I'm just going to fold that there. I printed the same image on both sides. And then I'll take a pencil and kind of mark where I want to cut my sides. So I think right about there. I'll leave up maybe 1/8 of an inch on the outside of my stitching, and there. And then I'm just going to cut this here with my paper cutter. Oh, one other thing I should mention is I do like to fold this edge down. So let's do that first. I'm going to fold that down and glue that down, so that just leaves a nicer edge there. So I'll get my glue stick and then just glue that down. And now I will go and cut my sides. Okay, I chopped my sides off, And now the last thing is to just kind of fold this down so that the card fits in there. And then I'm going to cut that off, maybe give it about 1.25 inch flap. Okay, I've got my flap cut off, and I do like to round these at the top. So I'm just going to give that a cut in this one. Okay, now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and just stitch up these two sides here. If you don't want to stitch, you could glue those down as well. Okay, I have my envelope stitched up on the sides, so I've got a nice little pocket there for our card. And one thing I thought I would do here to kind of do a closure is to add a little tab with an eyelet, and then we can run some string through there. So I have this offcut of a hanging file folder, and I think I'll just kind of fold that in half, and then we can put that right about there. So I'll cut that with my scissors. Probably should have a bone folder, but I don't have one handy. Okay, and I think I'll glue that on first. So just run a little bit of glue on the inside. Glue that on. Try to get it centered. Okay, and then got a little eyelet I want to add to that. And I'm just going to get my 1/4 inch punch for that one. Okay, and now one more embellishment on the card that I thought I would add is, especially on something that's maybe a little more masculine, I like to add some, maybe a book spine or book part. I've got this cigar box full of them. So here's a book spine that I have. I can maybe take a piece of this and just kind of lay it inside here. See how that looks. It's a little crumbly. That's maybe a little bigger than I like. I've got this one too. Maybe I'll try that one. And then maybe something like that. Gonna get these loose pieces off here, otherwise it's not going to stick. Okay, that just adds maybe a little bit of texture in there. And so I can stick that in there. And then I've got a little piece of twine here that we can use just to thread through. Wrap it a couple times and tie it. And we have ourselves an envelope and a birthday card in not too much time. I want to share with you that I will be checking off the #1 item on my bucket list next week. I am leaving for Paris in a few days, and I am so excited about that. And when I return, it will be very much into flower planting time, and that usually takes me a good week. So I'm telling you all this because it might be a good month before I'm back here. I will try to leave a few photos on my Instagram page just to let you know where I am and what I'm up to. But otherwise, it might be a little bit, but I promise I will be back. So until next time, au revoir.